The rain hammered against the pavement like angry fists, but Duke didn't flinch. The large German shepherd sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the rusted manhole cover in the back alley. 3 hours now. 3 hours in the pouring rain, his fur matted against his powerful frame, water streaming down his face. Robert Mitchell's calls grew increasingly desperate. "Duke, come on, boy, inside now." But the dog wouldn't budge. Something was different today. Duke's ears twitched forward, catching sounds no human could hear. His body trembled not from the cold, but from something primal, urgency, purpose. Several neighbors had gathered now, umbrellas tilted against the downpour, watching the peculiar standoff between man and dog. Then they heard it, faint but unmistakable, a whimper. Or was it a cry? It seemed to rise from beneath the metal disc, from the darkness below. James Wilson from Public Works crouched beside the manhole, pressed his ear against the wet metal, and looked up with wide eyes. "There's someone down there," he whispered. When they finally pried open the heavy cover, the beam of James's flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing what Duke had known all along. Huddled in a small dry patch against the curved concrete wall, eyes reflecting the light like a frightened animal, was a small boy, filthy, trembling, alive. The collective gasp of shock seemed to hang in the rain-soaked air as the child's terrified eyes looked up at the circle of faces, his small hand reaching upward through the darkness. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The Mitchell family had seen their share of hardships before Duke's discovery at the manhole. Robert Mitchell, a 65-year-old retired Army veteran with steel gray hair and permanently furrowed brows, had served two tours in Afghanistan before retiring to the quiet Portland suburb. The modest 2-story colonial house on Maple Street had been his home for 30 years, first with his late wife Eleanor, then alone after her passing from cancer 8 years ago. Just 1 year prior, he had remarried Sarah Collins, now Sarah Mitchell, a warm-hearted 62-year-old former pediatric nurse with kind eyes and a gentle touch that seemed to ease Robert's perpetual tension. Their household had expanded unexpectedly 2 years ago when Robert's son David and daughter-in-law Melissa died in a horrific highway pileup, leaving behind their 9-year-old daughter Lily. The transition had been difficult for everyone. Robert, who had missed much of his own son's childhood while deployed, now faced raising his granddaughter amidst his own crushing guilt. Sarah found herself suddenly a step-grandmother to a grief-stricken child who clung to memories of parents Sarah had never met. And Lily, a solemn child with her father's piercing blue eyes and her grandmother Eleanor's auburn hair, had retreated into a world of whispered conversations with Duke, the family's 6th member. Duke had been Robert's companion since retirement, a military-trained German shepherd who had served alongside soldiers in Afghanistan before being adopted by Robert through a veterans program. The dog's disciplined demeanor occasionally gave way to bursts of playful energy that only Lily could reliably trigger. Their connection had been instant and profound, 2 souls familiar with loss finding comfort in each other's silent understanding. The Mitchell house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, with a large fenced backyard that backed up to a wooded area with a small maintenance road and drainage system. Their neighborhood was tight-knit, the kind where people still brought casseroles when someone fell ill and gathered for summer barbecues. It was here, in this seemingly ordinary setting, that Duke had begun exhibiting his strange behavior 10 days ago, sitting for hours each day by the old manhole cover in the back alley, refusing food, water, or commands as if standing sentinel over something only he could sense. The first signs of Duke's unusual behavior appeared on a Tuesday morning in early October. The family had just finished breakfast when Sarah noticed Duke wasn't lounging in his usual spot by the kitchen door. She found him in the backyard, sitting rigidly by the old manhole cover near the property line where the yard met the maintenance access road. Sarah called him for his morning walk, but Duke merely turned his head, acknowledged her with a brief glance, then returned his gaze to the metal disc embedded in the ground. "Robert, something's wrong with Duke," Sarah said when she returned to the kitchen. Robert dismissed her concerns with a wave. "Probably just a raccoon or squirrel down there, and he'll forget about it by dinner." But Duke didn't forget. When Lily returned from school that afternoon, the dog remained at his post, motionless except for the occasional tilt of his head, as if listening. Robert tried commands, Lily attempted to lure him with his favorite tennis ball, and Sarah even placed his dinner bowl beside him, but Duke held his position, taking quick bites only when the family wasn't watching. "I've never seen him ignore a direct command," Robert muttered, concern finally creeping into his voice as the evening descended. Eventually, they coaxed Duke inside for the night, but the next morning he was back at his station, eyes fixed on the manhole, body tense with anticipation. Days passed, and Duke's fixation only intensified. His routine became rigid. He would spend exactly 5 hours by the manhole each day, starting precisely at 2 in the afternoon, regardless of weather or distractions. The family's concern deepened as Duke lost interest in his walks, his play sessions with Lily, and even began to lose weight despite Sarah's efforts to tempt him with special treats. "Should we call the vet?" Sarah asked on the 7th day, watching Duke through the kitchen window as rain pelted down on his stoic form. "It's not a medical issue," Robert replied, his military experience with working dogs giving weight to his assessment. "He's alerting to something specific. I just can't figure out what." By the 10th day, Duke had begun to whine softly when stationed at the manhole, a sound so plaintive it made Lily's eyes well with tears. The family's concern had transformed into a gnawing worry that permeated the household, creating tension where harmony had once prevailed. It was Lily who made the first real discovery. Having watched Duke's vigilance for days, her curiosity finally overcame her obedience to her grandfather's instruction to leave Duke be. On a crisp Thursday afternoon, while Sarah was grocery shopping and Robert was fixing the garage door, Lily slipped out to the backyard and hid behind the large maple tree, observing Duke from a different angle. As the autumn wind rustled through the remaining leaves, Lily heard what Duke had been hearing all along, a faint, muffled sound emanating from the manhole. At first she thought it might be water rushing through the drainage system, but as she crept closer, the sound took shape, a whimper, perhaps, or a sob. So faint she couldn't be certain she wasn't imagining it. Her heart racing, Lily retreated to the house, conflicted about what to do. Would her grandparents believe her? Would they think she was making up stories again, as they had when she claimed to still talk to her parents at night? She paced her bedroom for nearly an hour before finally descending to the kitchen where Sarah was unpacking groceries. Grandma Sarah, she began hesitantly, the unfamiliar title still awkward on her tongue even after a year. "I think there's something alive in the manhole." I heard noises. Sarah set down the can of soup she was holding and regarded her step-granddaughter carefully. "What kind of noises, Lily?" "Like crying, maybe, but really quiet." Lily twisted a strand of hair nervously. "Duke's been trying to tell us, I think." Sarah's first instinct was to attribute the sounds to Lily's active imagination, perhaps influenced by Duke's strange behavior in her ongoing grief process. The child's therapist had warned them that displaced children often created narratives to regain a sense of control. Yet something in Lily's earnest expression gave Sarah pause. "Let's go listen together," Sarah suggested, drying her hands on a dish towel. Together they approached the manhole where Duke sat, his ears perked forward at their approach. Sarah knelt on the ground, ignoring the dirt that would stain her jeans, and pressed her ear against the cold metal cover. Minutes passed. Lily watched Sarah's face, seeking validation. Just as Sarah was about to pull away and gently explain about imagination and grief to Lily, she heard it, a small, broken sound that was unmistakably human. Sarah's blood ran cold. "Go get your grandfather," she whispered to Lily, not wanting to move from the spot, as if her presence might somehow reassure whoever was below. That evening, the Mitchell dining room became a war room. Robert paced while Sarah and Lily sat at the table, Duke planted firmly between them, more animated than he'd been in days. It could be anything, Robert reasoned, military training pushing him toward rational explanations. Maybe a recording device malfunctioning, or an echo from somewhere else in the drainage system. "It was a child, Robert," Sarah insisted, 30 years of pediatric nursing evident in her certainty. I've heard enough children cry to know the difference. What do we do? Lily asked, her small voice cutting through the tension. We can't just leave 'em down there. Robert stopped pacing. We need to get that manhole open, but we can't just pry it up ourselves. Those covers weigh over 100 pounds, and if there is someone down there, we could cause a panic or an injury. James Wilson works for the Public Works Department, Sarah suggested. He lives just 3 blocks over. He'd have the proper equipment and authorization. Robert nodded, already reaching for his phone. I'll call him right now. As the evening deepened into night, neighbors noticed the unusual activity at the Mitchell house. Lights remained on well past the family's usual bedtime. A small gathering formed on the sidewalk when James Wilson's truck pulled up, his official city jacket and equipment drawing curious eyes. Word spread quickly. Something strange was happening at the old manhole by the Mitchell property. We should wait until morning, James suggested after examining the manhole from above. Better light, and I can bring a confined space team if needed. No, Robert's response was immediate and uncharacteristically sharp. If there's someone down there, they've already been there too long. Duke's been trying to tell us for 10 days. At the mention of his name, Duke barked once, the first normal dog behavior he'd exhibited in days. The sound seemed to settle the matter. All right, James conceded, retrieving tools from his truck. But let's be careful. Stand back, everyone. As neighbors gathered and flashlights illuminated the scene, James positioned his specialized hook in the small opening of the cover. With Robert's help, they began to lift, the heavy metal groaning in protest as it was raised for perhaps the first time in years. Duke stood at attention, his posture alert but calm, as if he knew his vigil was finally being acknowledged. None of them were prepared for what the flashlight beam would reveal in the darkness below. James Wilson's flashlight beam cut through the darkness like a surgeon's knife, revealing a small huddled form pressed against the curved concrete wall. The child, a boy no older than 4 or 5, was curled into a fetal position, his clothes soaked and filthy, his face smeared with dirt and tears. His eyes, wide with terror and reflecting the harsh light, squinted upward at the circle of faces peering down at him. For a moment, no one moved or spoke, the tableau frozen in collective shock. "Dear God," Sarah whispered, her nurse's training already assessing the situation. "He's just a baby." James recovered first, years of emergency response taking over. "I'm going down." Robert helped anchor the ladder. His voice was steady, professional, belying the tremor in his hands as he secured the folding ladder to the rim of the opening. Duke began to whine and pace, his mission suddenly validated before the stunned onlookers. "It's okay, little one," James called down softly as he descended. "We're here to help you. You're safe now." The boy pressed himself further against the wall, eyes darting frantically between James and the opening above like a cornered animal weighing escape routes. When James reached the bottom and took a tentative step toward him, the child released a sound somewhere between a whimper and a scream. "He's terrified," Sarah called down, her medical expertise surfacing. James moved slowly. "Talk to him. Let him know he's safe." Up above, the crowd had grown as neighbors in bathrobes and jackets gathered in the rain, word spreading through hushed phone calls and texts. Someone had called 911. The distant wail of sirens pierced the night. Robert stood guard at the manhole's edge, face grim with concentration, while Sarah knelt nearby, ready to provide immediate assistance. Lily watched from a few paces back, clutching Duke's collar with white knuckles. "Hey there, buddy," James said gently, crouching to appear less threatening. "My name's James. That dog up there? He told us you were down here. He's been watching over you." He extended his hand slowly, palm up. "Would you like to come up and meet him?" The mention of Duke seemed to register with the boy. His eyes flicked upward to where the German shepherd's head was visible at the rim, ears forward and alert. A tiny nod, almost imperceptible, gave James the opening he needed. I'm going to come closer now, okay? Then we're going to climb up that ladder together. There are nice people up there who want to help you." With excruciating patience, James inched forward until he was close enough to see the boy clearly. What he saw made his stomach turn, bruises on the child's arms, a cut above his eye, ribs visible through his torn t-shirt. The boy was severely malnourished and showing signs of exposure. Yet somehow, despite what must have been days in this concrete prison, he was alive. "I'm going to pick you up now," James warned softly before gathering the small, surprisingly light body in his arms. The child neither resisted nor assisted, his limbs limp with exhaustion or fear, or both. The ascent was awkward but quick, James managing the latter one-handed while cradling his precious cargo against his chest. As they emerged from the manhole, Duke lunged forward, breaking free from Lily's grip. Sarah gasped, fearing the dog's excitement might frighten the child further, but Duke simply pressed his nose gently against the boy's dangling hand and whined softly. To everyone's astonishment, the child's fingers twitched in response, weakly curling into Duke's fur. Sarah immediately took charge, her years in pediatric wards supplanting any official authority. "He needs warmth, hydration, and medical attention in that order," she directed, already shrugging off her cardigan to wrap around the trembling child. "Robert, get blankets from the house. Lily, bring water room temperature, not cold." The approaching sirens grew louder as an ambulance and 2 police cruisers turned onto Maple Street, lights painting the rain-slicked pavement in alternating red and blue. The neighborhood parted to allow the emergency vehicles through, but clustered back almost immediately, morbid curiosity battling with genuine concern. Paramedics took over with professional efficiency, gently transferring the boy to a stretcher. One began to cut away the filthy clothes while another started an IV line. A portable heater was activated, surrounding the child with desperately needed warmth. Duke paced alongside the stretcher until a paramedic gently but firmly moved him aside. "BP is low, temp at 94.2, one paramedic reported. Dehydrated, signs of malnutrition, possible pneumonia developing, multiple contusions and lacerations in various stages of healing." The clinical assessment, rendered in calm, detached tone, somehow made the horror more acute. This wasn't just a lost child, this was a victim of something deliberate and prolonged. 2 police officers approached Robert and Sarah, notebooks ready. "Can you tell us exactly what happened?" The older officer asked, his weathered face grave beneath the brim of his department-issued cap. As Robert recounted Duke's strange behavior and their subsequent discovery, Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the ambulance where the boy was being prepared for transport. Lily had moved to stand beside her, slipping a small hand into Sarah's larger one. "Will he be okay?" Lily whispered, watching as oxygen was administered through a pediatric mask. "I hope so, sweetheart," Sarah answered honestly. "He's very sick, but they'll take good care of him at the hospital." The younger police officer stepped forward. "We'll need statements from everyone involved. And we'll need to know if anyone recognizes this child or has any information about how he might have ended up in the drainage system." A murmur passed through the crowd as neighbors shook their heads. No one recognized the boy, no children had been reported missing in their immediate community. The mystery deepened with each passing moment. As the paramedics prepared to load the stretcher into the ambulance, the boy suddenly became agitated, his thin arms reaching out toward the Mitchell's yard. Everyone turned to see what had captured his attention, Duke sitting at attention, eyes fixed on the child. The dog, one paramedic realized. He wants the dog. Sarah stepped forward. "His name is Duke. He's the one who found the boy." After a brief conference, the senior paramedic nodded. "The child is critically stressed. Anything that provides comfort is medically indicated at this point. Is there an adult who can accompany him with the dog?" "I will," Sarah volunteered immediately, already moving toward Duke. "I'm a retired pediatric nurse." Robert nodded his agreement, though concern lined his face. "We'll follow in the car," he said to Lily, who looked ready to protest the separation from both Sarah and Duke. As Sarah climbed into the ambulance with Duke held firmly by her side, the boy's eyes tracked their movement, a flicker of something relief, perhaps, or recognition crossing his bruised face. The doors closed, and the ambulance pulled away, siren now silent out of consideration for the fragile passenger. Left behind on Maple Street, Robert, Lily, and their neighbors stood in stunned silence, struggling to process what had just occurred in their quiet, ordinary community. The manhole stood open still, a dark mouth in the wet pavement, a portal to suffering none of them had suspected lay literally beneath their feet. Who would put a child down there? Someone finally voiced what everyone was thinking. And why? Robert placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder. "I don't know," he answered grimly. "But we're going to find out." The pediatric intensive care unit at Portland Memorial Hospital became the Mitchell family's second home in the days that followed. The boy, who doctors estimated to be approximately 4 years old, was suffering from severe malnutrition, dehydration, and early-stage pneumonia. His small body bore multiple bruises in various stages of healing, and X-rays revealed 2 previously fractured ribs that had healed improperly. The medical staff worked tirelessly, inserting feeding tubes, administering antibiotics, and monitoring his fragile condition around the clock. Sarah stayed at the hospital almost constantly, her former colleagues welcoming her experienced assistance. They bent rules to allow Duke limited visits, recognizing the extraordinary connection between the dog and the child. During these precious moments, the boy would reach out weakly to touch Duke's fur, his eyes following the animal's movements with desperate intensity. It was the only time he showed any response to his surroundings. "He's in a dissociative state," Dr. Eleanor Patel explained to Robert and Sarah during a consultation 3 days after the rescue. "It's a common trauma response, especially in children. His mind has essentially disconnected from reality as a protection mechanism." "Will he recover?" Robert asked, his military stoicism barely concealing his concern. "Physically, yes," Dr. Patel responded cautiously. "His body is young and resilient. But psychologically," she hesitated. "Children who experience severe trauma often carry those wounds for life. With proper therapy and support, many recover and lead normal lives, but it's a long road ahead." Robert nodded, his jaw tight. In the week since the discovery, he had spent hours with police detectives recounting every detail, examining neighborhood security footage, and searching for any clue to the boy's identity. The case had captured media attention, with reporters camped outside both the hospital and the Mitchell home, hungry for updates on what they'd dubbed the manhole miracle. Meanwhile, Lily had developed an almost obsessive interest in the nameless boy. She drew pictures for his hospital room, selected stuffed animals from her own collection to send to him, and peppered Sarah with endless questions about his condition each evening. "Why won't he talk?" she asked Sarah one night as they sat at the kitchen table, Robert absent for yet another police interview. "His mind is protecting him from something very scary," Sarah explained gently. "Sometimes when people, especially children, experience something terrible, they retreat inside themselves where it's safe." Lily considered this with the solemn contemplation that had become her hallmark since her parents' death. "Like I did after Mom and Dad died? When I wouldn't speak to anyone but Duke for 2 weeks? Sarah's heart ached at the comparison. Something like that, yes, but much more severe. The breakthrough came unexpectedly on the 7th day. Sarah had brought Duke for his approved visit, and Lily had been allowed to accompany them. The girl sat quietly beside the hospital bed, chattering softly to the unresponsive boy as she often did, telling him about Duke's adventures and her day at school. "Duke found you because he's a super dog," she explained matter-of-factly. "He was in the Army with Grandpa Robert before I was born. He can smell things other dogs can't, and he always knows when people are sad or scared." As she spoke, Lily gently placed one of her drawings on the boy's lap, a colorful depiction of Duke standing guard over a circle that presumably represented the manhole. The boy's eyes, which had been fixed vacantly on Duke, shifted to the drawing. His small hand reached out to touch it. "Do you like it?" Lily asked. I made it for you. That's Duke watching over you, keeping you safe." To everyone's shock, the boy's lips parted and a whisper emerged. "Michael." The room froze. Sarah, who had been adjusting an IV line, turned sharply. "Did he just—" "Michael," the boy repeated, his voice raspy from disuse. "I'm Michael." Lily's face lit up with a smile that had been rare since her parents' death. "Hi, Michael. I'm Lily." It was as if a dam had broken. Over the next hour, Michael spoke several more words: thirsty, dog, mom, each one celebrated as a miraculous victory. The medical staff was alerted, and Dr. Patel rushed in to document this significant development. By evening, a child psychologist had been consulted, and a careful interview protocol established. The police were equally interested in this development. Detective Andrea Martinez arrived the following morning, accompanied by a specially trained child interviewer. Sarah and Robert watched anxiously through a one-way window as the interviewer, a gentle-voiced woman named M.S. Collins, sat beside Michael's bed with a selection of anatomically correct dolls and drawing supplies. "Hello, Michael," M.S. Collins began. "I'm here to talk with you about what happened and how you ended up in that tunnel where Duke found you. Is that okay?" Michael's eyes darted to the window, seeming to sense the observers beyond. "Is the dog here?" Duke had been temporarily removed to avoid distractions during the interview. "Duke is waiting outside," Miss Collins assured him. "You can see him right after we talk." What followed was a halting fragment account that chilled everyone listening. Through a combination of simple sentences, nods, and doll play, Michael revealed pieces of his story. His mother had hidden him in the drainage tunnel, telling him to stay quiet and still until she returned. She had left him with a backpack containing water bottles and some food, promising to come back soon. But she never did. "The bad man was coming," Michael explained, his small hands trembling as he clutched a male doll. "Mom said hide. Mom said quiet." He demonstrated how his mother had lifted the manhole cover, helped him climb down, and given him specific instructions to move away from the opening and stay in the small dry area against the wall. Detective Martinez made rapid notes as the story unfolded. There was no definitive identification yet, but the details aligned with a domestic violence case from a neighboring county. 3 weeks prior, Amanda Reynolds had fled her abusive husband, taken their 4-year-old son. A restraining order had been violated multiple times, and Amanda had disappeared just when she was scheduled to testify against her husband. The son, named Michael, had vanished with her. While the investigation accelerated, the Mitchells faced their own decision point. With Michael's physical condition improving, discharge planning had begun. The hospital social worker, Mrs. Hernandez, met with Robert and Sarah to discuss options. "Michael will need specialized foster care," she explained, "preferably with someone experienced in childhood trauma. He'll require ongoing medical follow-up, psychological services, and possibly physical therapy." Sarah and Robert exchanged glances. They had discussed this possibility extensively over sleepless nights at their kitchen table. "We'd like to be considered as foster placement," Sarah said firmly. "I have pediatric nursing experience, and Robert's military background has given him training in trauma responses." Mrs. Hernandez looked skeptical. "Your intentions are admirable, but there are many factors to consider. Your age, for one. The presence of another child in the home. The ongoing investigation. And frankly, the media attention this case has garnered creates additional complications." "Duke," Robert said simply, "that boy has bonded with our dog in a way that professionals with years of training haven't been able to match. Separating them now could cause additional trauma." The social worker made notes but offered no promises. "I'll submit your request to the committee, but please understand there's an established process. Background checks, home inspections, interviews. It takes time." Word of the Mitchells' intention to foster Michael spread quickly through their neighborhood, generating unexpected controversy. While many neighbors rallied in support, organizing meal trains and offering to help prepare their home for another child, others expressed concerns. Patricia Wilson, the neighborhood association president and a retired child psychologist, voiced her objections directly during an impromptu confrontation in the local grocery store. "Sarah, you and Robert are in your 60s, she stated bluntly, cornering Sarah in the produce section. "You're already raising one traumatized child. Taking on another with such severe issues is irresponsible both to yourselves and to those children." "We appreciate your concern," Sarah replied with forced politeness, "but this is a family decision." Patricia persisted. "That boy needs specialized care from professionals trained in childhood trauma. Your nursing experience, while valuable, doesn't qualify you for this. And Robert's military background might actually be detrimental. Structured environments can re-traumatize abused children." The conversation left Sarah shaken, doubt creeping into her previously certain resolve. That evening she shared Patricia's concerns with Robert as they sat on their back porch, watching Lily push her swing listlessly. The girl had been subdued since learning they might not be allowed to bring Michael home. "Maybe she's right," Sarah admitted reluctantly. "Are we being selfish, driven by emotion rather than what's best for Michael?" Robert remained silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on Lily. "When David and Melissa died," he finally said, "I thought I was too old, too set in my ways to raise another child. I'd already failed once as a father, being absent for most of David's childhood. I was terrified of failing Lily, too." He turned to face Sarah, his weathered face softened with emotion. "But you taught me that family isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about showing up day after day and trying your best. That boy has connected with Duke for a reason. I believe we're meant to help him." Sarah reached for his hand, drawing strength from his conviction. "Then we fight for him, regardless of what the neighbors think." The following days brought a flurry of activity as the Mitchells prepared for the possibility of bringing Michael home. The spare bedroom was cleared of storage boxes and transformed into a child's room with furniture borrowed from neighbors whose children had outgrown it. Sarah researched trauma-informed care approaches and connected with parent support groups. Robert installed additional safety features throughout the house, conscious of the unique security concerns given the still unfolding investigation into Michael's circumstances. Lily threw herself into preparations with unexpected enthusiasm. She sorted through her books and toys, selecting items she thought Michael might enjoy, and proudly showed Sarah the half of her closet she had emptied for Michael's things. Her previous reticence seemed replaced by a protective determination that reminded Sarah powerfully of Robert. 2 weeks after Michael had first been discovered in the manhole, Detective Martinez requested an urgent meeting with the Mitchells at the police station. The sterile conference room felt ominous as they settled into uncomfortable chairs. Lily left in the care of a neighbor. "We've confirmed Michael's identity," Detective Martinez began without preamble. "He is indeed Michael Reynolds, age 4, son of Amanda and Richard Reynolds from Gresham County." She slid a photograph across the table, a smiling woman with Michael's eyes and dimpled cheeks, holding a slightly younger version of the boy they had come to care for. "This is Amanda Reynolds. She obtained a restraining order against her husband 3 months ago after he put her in the hospital with a broken jaw and fractured orbital socket. She was due to testify at his assault trial when she disappeared." Robert studied the photo intently. "And the father? Richard Reynolds? Have you located him?" Detective Martinez's expression tightened. "That's why I called you in today. Richard Reynolds was spotted in Portland yesterday, approximately 3 miles from your neighborhood. We believe he's looking for Michael." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God." "We don't think he knows Michael has been found or where he is currently located," Martinez continued. "Hospital records are sealed, and Michael's identity hasn't been released to the media. But we need to take additional precautions. We're increasing patrol presence in your neighborhood and at the hospital." Robert's military training surfaced in his rapid, practical questions. "Do you have a photograph of Richard Reynolds? What vehicle is he driving? Does he have access to weapons? The detective provided what information she could, including a recent mugshot of a hard-faced man with cold eyes and a distinctive scar across his right cheek. We're doing everything possible to locate and apprehend him, but until then, I need your absolute cooperation with security protocols. As they left the police station, the weight of this new threat settled heavily upon them. Their desire to provide Michael a safe home had just become considerably more complicated. The boy wasn't just a trauma victim in need of care, he was potentially an ongoing danger from the very person who had likely caused that trauma in the first place. That evening, as Robert conducted a thorough security check of their property, Sarah received a call from Mrs. Hernandez. The foster care committee had accelerated their review given the emerging safety concerns and had reached a decision. The Mitchells were approved as emergency temporary foster placement for Michael Reynolds, with conditions including weekly home visits, mandatory counseling participation, and strict adherence to the security protocols established by law enforcement. "He can come home with us?" Sarah repeated, hardly daring to believe it. "As soon as he's medically cleared for discharge," Mrs. Hernandez confirmed. "Likely within the next 48 hours. When Sarah shared the news with Robert and Lily, their reactions were subdued, tempered by the knowledge of Richard Reynolds' presence in Portland. What should have been an unambiguously joyful moment was now complicated by fear and uncertainty. Yet beneath that, a steely resolve took hold. This child who had already endured so much would not face additional threats alone. The Mitchells would protect him, whatever the cost. As they prepared Michael's room with renewed purpose, Lily paused while arranging stuffed animals on the small bed. "Do you think Michael's daddy will try to take him away from us?" she asked, her young voice steady despite the frightening question. The day Michael came home with the Mitchells dawned bright and clear, nature's sharp contrast to the storm of emotions brewing within their household. Dr. Patel had finally authorized discharge after 3 weeks of intensive treatment, though she emphasized that Michael's recovery was far from complete. The boy still suffered from occasional night terrors, spoke primarily in single-word sentences, and exhibited significant separation anxiety when Duke was removed from his sight. Nevertheless, his physical improvement had been remarkable. The pneumonia cleared, weight gradually increasing, and the haunted vacancy in his eyes occasionally replaced by flickers of curiosity. Sarah spent the morning preparing the house with methodical precision, checking and rechecking each detail. Fresh linens adorned the small bed in the newly created bedroom, a nightlight shaped like a German shepherd plugged into the outlet, and a carefully selected collection of stuffed animals arranged on the pillows. In the kitchen, she prepared Michael's favorite foods identified during his hospital stay: plain macaroni and cheese, apple slices with the skin removed, and vanilla pudding. Robert focused on security measures, installing additional locks, programming emergency numbers into all phones, and reviewing evacuation procedures with Lily. Remember, he instructed his granddaughter as he checked the new window sensors. "If the alarm sounds, or if I or Grandma Sarah tell you to, you take Michael and Duke to the safe room immediately. No questions, no delays." Lily nodded with uncharacteristic seriousness. At 9 years old, she had absorbed the gravity of their situation with remarkable maturity. "I'll protect him, Grandpa." Robert paused in his tasks, suddenly struck by how much responsibility this child had assumed. Kneeling to her level, he gently cupped her face. "This isn't your burden to carry alone, Lily. The adults will handle the scary parts. Your job is just to be Michael's friend." The hospital discharge process took longer than anticipated, with multiple forms to sign, care instructions to review, and a final consultation with the trauma specialist. When they finally emerged through the hospital's main entrance, Michael clutched Sarah's hand with one of his own and a small stuffed German shepherd, Lily's gift, with the other. He wore new clothes provided by hospital staff, his thin frame swimming in even the smallest available sizes. A police escort waited discreetly nearby, a sobering reminder of the ongoing threat. Duke, waiting in the Mitchells' SUV, began whining excitedly the moment Michael appeared. The boy's face transformed at the sound, the first genuine smile they had witnessed breaking across his features. "Duke," he said clearly, the name emerging with none of the hesitation that marked his other communications. The journey home proceeded under the watchful eyes of 2 patrol cars, one leading and one following their vehicle. Michael sat silently in his booster seat, gazing out the window with wary vigilance, his hand buried in Duke's fur. When they turned onto Maple Street, neighbors discreetly appeared on porches and lawns, offering supportive waves while maintaining a respectful distance as instructed by Detective Martinez. "Welcome home, Michael," Sarah said gently as Robert parked in their driveway. The boy made no response, but his grip on the stuffed animal tightened. Lily unbuckled her seatbelt eagerly. "I want to show you your new room. It's right next to mine, and I put some of my favorite books on your shelf. And Duke's bed is there too, so he can sleep with you." Michael followed them into the house with halting steps, Duke pressed against his side like a furry guardian. The dog seemed to understand his protective role intuitively, maintaining constant contact with the child while remaining alert to their surroundings. As they entered, Michael stopped abruptly in the entryway, his eyes darting around the unfamiliar space, breathing accelerating. "It's okay," Sarah soothed, recognizing the signs of anxiety. "This is our home. You're safe here." Robert hung back slightly, mindful of how his large frame and deep voice might appear threatening to a child who had known only male violence. "How about a tour?" he suggested, addressing Lily rather than Michael directly. "You can be our guide." Lily took her role seriously, leading Michael slowly through each room, explaining their functions and pointing out features she thought might interest him. "This is the kitchen where Grandma Sarah makes the best cookies. This is the living room where we watch movies on Friday nights. This is Duke's water bowl he doesn't mind sharing if you get thirsty." By the time they reached Michael's bedroom, the boy's nervous trembling had subsided somewhat. He stood in the doorway, taking in the space prepared especially for him, the blue comforter with cloud patterns, the bookshelf stocked with picture books, and the small desk with drawing supplies. For a long moment he remained silent, then whispered a single word that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. "Mine?" "All yours," she confirmed, blinking rapidly. "For as long as you need it." The first few hours passed in a delicate dance of introduction and acclimatization. Michael explored his new environment with cautious curiosity, always keeping either Duke or a wall at his back, never allowing himself to be cornered. He accepted food when offered, but wouldn't sit at the table, preferring to eat standing near the kitchen counter where he could monitor the room's entrances. When Sarah attempted to show him how the bath worked, he became agitated, shaking his head violently and retreating to a corner. No bath, he insisted, the first complete refusal he had voiced. No water. Given his experience trapped near drainage water, his fear made perfect sense. "That's okay," Sarah assured him. "No bath today. We can try another time or find a different way to get clean." As evening approached, the true challenge began. Michael grew increasingly anxious as daylight faded, his eyes constantly returning to the windows as shadows lengthened across the lawn. By dinner time, he had positioned himself in the corner of the living room, Duke curled protectively around him, refusing food or interaction. "He's afraid of the dark," Lily observed with the simple insight of a child who understood fear intimately. "After my parents died, I couldn't sleep unless all the lights were on." Robert and Sarah exchanged glances, recognizing the wisdom in her assessment. Michael, Sarah approached slowly, settling on the floor a few feet away from him. "Would you like us to leave some lights on tonight? Or maybe a flashlight of your own?" The boy considered this, then nodded slightly. Robert disappeared and returned with a selection of flashlights, ranging from a heavy-duty tactical model to a small bedside lamp shaped like a rocket ship. Michael selected the smallest option, a compact penlight on a cord that could be worn around the neck. Once it was securely in place, some tension visibly left his small body. Bedtime proved another hurdle. Despite his evident exhaustion, Michael refused to enter his bedroom when the time came. After several gentle attempts, Sarah found him curled in the living room couch instead, clutching his flashlight and stuffed dog, Duke maintaining loyal vigil beside him. "Should we insist?" Robert whispered to Sarah in the kitchen, concern etched across his face. The therapist emphasized the importance of routine. Sarah shook her head. "Not tonight. This is all overwhelming enough. Let him sleep where he feels safe." They compromised by bringing a blanket and pillow to the couch, keeping a dim lamp illuminated, and taking turns sitting nearby until Michael finally succumbed to exhaustion around midnight. Robert took the first watch, settling in an armchair with a book, his military training making him comfortable with night duty. He watched the rise and fall of Michael's chest, marveling at the resilience of this small human who had endured unimaginable horrors yet still found the courage to trust, however tentatively. The peace lasted barely 3 hours. Robert was just waking Sarah for her shift when a piercing scream tore through the house. They rushed to the living room to find Michael thrashing against invisible restraints, his eyes open but unseeing, locked in the grip of a night terror. "No water, Mommy, Mommy." The words erupted between gasping sobs, his small body rigid with fear. Duke was already in action, pressing his weight gently against Michael, a technique that often helped Lily during her own nightmares. Sarah approached cautiously, knowing that waking someone abruptly from a night terror could increase their disorientation. "You're safe, Michael," she murmured, repeating the phrase in a steady rhythm. "You're with the Mitchells. Duke is here. You're safe." Gradually, the screams subsided to whimpers, then to shuddering breaths. Michael's eyes focused slowly, recognition dawning as he registered Duke's familiar presence. "Bad dream," he whispered. "Yes, a bad dream," Sarah confirmed, "but it's not real anymore. You're here with us now." Michael's gaze moved from Sarah to Robert, who stood a few paces back, then to Lily, who had appeared in the doorway clutching her own stuffed animal. Surprisingly, it was to Robert that Michael directed his next words. "Bad man comin'," he stated with terrifying certainty. "Find me." Robert felt a chill course through his spine. "Did you see the bad man, Michael? In your dream?" The boy nodded, fingers twisting anxiously in Duke's fur. Driving car, looking. Robert and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. Was this just a manifestation of trauma and fear, or had Michael actually glimpsed Richard Reynolds somewhere in the neighborhood? Either possibility was disturbing. "I'll call Detective Martinez," Robert said quietly to Sarah before addressing Michael directly. "Thank you for telling us, Michael. We'll make sure the bad man can't get to you." While Robert made the call in the kitchen, Sarah suggested they all move to the master bedroom, its king-sized bed offering room for everyone. Lily immediately climbed in, patting the space beside her invitingly. After some hesitation, Michael allowed Sarah to carry him, Duke following closely. By the time Robert returned, all three were settled in the large bed, Duke positioned protectively at their feet. "Martinez is sending a patrol car to do an immediate sweep of the neighborhood," Robert reported in a low voice. "She's taken it seriously, but without more specific information." Sarah nodded her understanding. The authorities could only do so much without concrete evidence of Richard Reynolds' presence. The responsibility for Michael's immediate safety rested primarily with them. No one slept much that night. Michael dozed fitfully, startling awake at the slightest sound. Lily maintained physical contact with him throughout, her hand resting reassuringly against his arm. Sarah and Robert took turns napping, ensuring one adult remained vigilant at all times. Dawn brought relief in the form of light, but no real resolution to the tension that had settled over the household. The following days established a precarious routine. Michael gradually explored more of the house, though he still refused to sleep in his designated bedroom. He began to use more complex sentences, particularly when communicating with Lily, who had appointed herself his unofficial translator and advocate. Duke remained his constant companion, the dog's presence seeming to anchor Michael in moments of anxiety. Sarah observed subtle but concerning behaviors that spoke volumes about Michael's past experiences. He flinched at sudden movements, hoarded food in his pockets, and positioned himself to monitor doorways and windows constantly. When Robert raised his voice slightly to call from upstairs, Michael immediately flattened himself against the nearest wall, becoming almost invisible, a practiced response that suggested long exposure to threats. 1 week after Michael's arrival, the fragile equilibrium was shattered. Robert was in the front yard pruning bushes, strategically positioned to maintain sight lines to the street, when an unfamiliar sedan drove slowly past the house. The driver's face was partially obscured by sunglasses and a baseball cap, but something in his focused attention triggered Robert's combat-owned instincts. The car continued down Maple Street, turned at the corner, and disappeared, but the damage was done. "I think we had a drive-by," Robert reported to Detective Martinez, who arrived within 20 minutes to review security camera footage from the Wilsons' house across the street. The images were grainy but sufficient to identify the vehicle as a rental car, similar to one Richard Reynolds had obtained 3 days prior in a neighboring city. "We're closing in," Martinez assured them, though her tight expression belied her confident words. "He's making mistakes, getting desperate. That works in our favor." The sighting prompted increased security measures. Patrol frequency doubled, a plainclothes officer was stationed in an unmarked car down the street, and the Mitchells implemented a full lockdown protocol. Michael, sensing the heightened tension, regressed noticeably, speaking less, eating poorly, and waking with nightmares every night. The situation reached crisis point during a scheduled home visit from Mrs. Hernandez, the social worker overseeing Michael's case. She arrived to find a household under siege, blinds drawn, doors double-locked, and everyone moving with the hypervigilance of those living under constant threat. "This environment is becoming untenable," she observed after witnessing Michael's trembling reaction to a car backfiring down the street. "The stress is compounding his trauma. We may need to consider moving him to a more secure facility until his father is apprehended." "No," Lily protested immediately, her voice sharp with fear. "You can't take him away. Duke would be sad. Michael would be sad." Mrs. Hernandez softened her expression. "I understand you've all grown attached to Michael, but my primary concern must be his safety and well-being. Moving him now would cause additional trauma," Sarah argued, her professional knowledge informing her position. "He's just beginning to trust us. Another disruption could set his recovery back significantly." The conversation continued in the kitchen while Michael remained in the living room with Duke and Lily. When Mrs. Hernandez emerged to say goodbye to the children, she found a scene that gave her pause. Michael was seated at the coffee table, focused intently on a drawing. Lily sat beside him, offering colored pencils as needed. Duke lay at their feet, alert but calm. The picture taking shape under Michael's careful hand showed 5 figures, a man, a woman, a girl, a boy, and a dog, all standing beside a house with a bright sun overhead. "That's a lovely drawing, Michael," Mrs. Hernandez commented. "Can you tell me about it?" Michael looked up, his expression unusually animated. "My family," he said clearly, pointing to each figure in turn. "Robert, Sarah, Lily, me, Duke." Then, with deliberate emphasis, he added, "home. Safe. You Dorian Tay." Those 2 words, spoken with such conviction, seemed to sway Mrs. Hernandez more than all the logical arguments presented earlier. "I see," she said softly. "Well, I'll be back to check on you next week, Michael." As she prepared to leave, the social worker pulled Sarah aside. "I still have concerns about the security situation, but I recognize the bond that's forming. I'll recommend maintaining the current placement for now, with additional security protocols in place." Sarah released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Mrs. Hernandez cautioned. "This situation remains volatile. Richard Reynolds is still out there, and based on his history, he won't give up easily." Her warning proved prophetic. That evening, as Robert conducted his nightly security check, the telephone rang. Sarah answered to find only silence on the line, then a single sentence that froze her blood. I know you have my son." The voice was male, cold and eerily controlled. "And I'm coming to get him." The line went dead before she could respond. With shaking hands, Sarah immediately dialed Detective Martinez, then joined Robert in checking every lock, window, and potential entry point in the house. Lily and Michael were moved to the designated safe room, a renovated bathroom in the home's interior with no windows and a reinforced door. Duke stationed himself at the threshold, hackles raised as if he sensed the impending danger. As police converged on Maple Street and neighbors were quietly evacuated, the Mitchells prepared for a confrontation they had hoped to avoid but had always known might come. The final battle for Michael's future could no longer be postponed. The confirmation came on a Tuesday morning, delivered by Detective Martinez in the Mitchells' living room. Her face, usually composed, carried the unmistakable weight of tragedy as she asked Robert and Sarah to sit down. Michael was upstairs with Lily and Duke, engaged in the morning art therapy routine Sarah had established. "We found Amanda Reynolds," Martinez began, her voice professionally modulated but unable to completely mask the gravity of her news. "I'm deeply sorry to inform you that she is deceased." Sarah reached for Robert's hand, gripping it tightly as Martinez continued with the clinical details. Amanda's body had been discovered in a remote wooded area 50 miles outside Portland, partially concealed under fallen branches and forest debris. A preliminary forensic examination indicated she had been dead for approximately 3 weeks, which aligned with the timeline of Michael's abandonment in the drainage system. "Cause of death?" Robert asked, his military background enabling him to process tragedy through facts and details. "Blunt force trauma to the head and neck," Martinez replied, "consistent with a violent assault. We have substantial evidence linking Richard Reynolds to the scene, including DNA and tire impressions matching the rental vehicle observed in your neighborhood." The detective paused, allowing them a moment to absorb this information before addressing the next critical matter. "We need to discuss how to handle this with Michael. Our child psychologist recommends a careful, age-appropriate disclosure rather than attempting to shield him from the truth entirely." Sarah wiped away tears that had begun falling silently. "He's been asking for his mother every day, drawing pictures of her coming to take him home someday. How do we tell a 4-year-old child that his mother is never coming back?" "The psychologist can be present when you tell him," Martinez offered. "She has experience guiding families through these conversations." Robert stood abruptly, moving to the window to stare out at the quiet street. "Amanda Reynolds died trying to protect her son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She hid him where she thought he'd be safe, planning to return for him. She gave her life for that boy." The weight of Amanda's sacrifice hung heavily in the room. She had made the desperate choice to hide Michael in the drainage system, likely knowing Richard was closing in on them. The backpack with supplies, the specific instructions to stay quiet and still, all part of a mother's final attempt to save her child, even as she herself faced mortal danger. Later that afternoon, Dr. Eleanor Patel, the child psychologist assigned to Michael's case, arrived at the Mitchell home. She brought with her specially selected therapeutic books about loss and a small memory box for Michael to store keepsakes related to his mother. Together, they formulated a gentle approach that would provide Michael the truth without overwhelming his capacity to process it. The conversation took place in the living room, Michael seated between Sarah and Robert on the couch, Duke at his feet. Lily had been asked to spend the afternoon with a neighbor, a decision she protested until Robert explained that Michael would need special time to process some difficult news. "Michael," Dr. Patel began gently, "do you remember how your mommy put you in the safe place and said she would come back for you?" Michael nodded, his small fingers automatically reaching for Duke's fur, his instinctive self-soothing mechanism. "Your mommy wanted very much to come back for you," Dr. Patel continued. "She loved you so much and wanted to keep you safe. But something very sad happened and your mommy got hurt. The hurt was so big that the doctors couldn't fix it." Michael's eyes widened, understanding beginning to dawn in their depths. "Mommy sick? Mommy sick?" Sarah gently took his small hand in hers. "No, sweetheart, Mommy is gone. She died, which means her body stopped working and her spirit went to heaven. She can't come back, but she loved you very, very much." For a moment, Michael sat perfectly still, processing this information with a child's limited framework for understanding death. Then his face crumpled and a wail of pure anguish erupted from his small body. It was a primal sound of grief that seemed too large for his frame, a sound that brought tears to the eyes of every adult present. "No," he screamed, his body rigid with denial. "Mommy coming. Mommy promised." There were no words adequate to comfort such raw pain. Sarah simply gathered Michael into her arms as he sobbed, his entire body shaking with the force of his grief. Robert moved closer, placing one large, steady hand on Michael's back, offering silent support. Duke whined softly, pressing his head against Michael's leg, instinctively responding to his distress. The hours that followed passed in a blur of tears, questions, and moments of haunting silence. Michael cycled through the typical stages of a child's grief: disbelief, anger, profound sadness, and desperate bargaining. "If I'm very good, will Mommy come back?" he asked at one point, breaking Sarah's heart anew with the impossible hope in his voice. By evening, Michael had exhausted himself into a fitful sleep on the couch, clutching a photograph of Amanda that Detective Martinez had provided from happier times. Sarah and Robert sat in the adjacent kitchen, speaking in hushed tones over untouched cups of cold tea. "I've never felt so helpless," Sarah admitted, her face drawn with emotional fatigue. "Nothing in my nursing career prepared me for this." Robert reached across the table to cover her hand with his. "You're doing everything possible, we both are. Sometimes presence is all we can offer." Their moment of solidarity was interrupted by the telephone. Robert answered to find Mrs. Hernandez on the line, her tone uncharacteristically urgent. "I've received some concerning information," she began without preamble. "Amanda Reynolds has a sister in Minnesota who has filed for emergency custody of Michael. She's claiming that blood relatives should take precedence over temporary foster placement." The news hit like a physical blow. After all Michael had endured, after the tenuous trust he had begun to establish with them, the prospect of another disruption seemed unthinkably cruel. "But he doesn't even know this, Aunt," Sarah protested when Robert relayed the information. "He's never mentioned her, and she's never reached out until now." "Unfortunately, the family court system generally favors biological relatives," Mrs. Hernandez explained. "Unless there are compelling reasons to maintain the current placement, the court may be inclined to grant her petition." In the days that followed, the Mitchell household felt like a fortress under siege from multiple fronts. Richard Reynolds remained at large, his threatening phone call and drive-by surveillance serving as constant reminders of physical danger. Meanwhile, the legal system presented a different but equally threatening challenge in the form of Diane Kelly, Amanda's sister, who had flown in from Minneapolis with an aggressive family attorney. The community divided sharply over the situation. Many neighbors rallied around the Mitchells, organizing a letter-writing campaign to the family court judge and establishing a neighborhood watch program to supplement the police patrols. Others, however, sided with the biological aunt, arguing that Michael needed his real family to properly process his mother's death and maintain his cultural heritage. Patricia Wilson, the neighborhood association president, who had initially opposed the Mitchells' fostering of Michael, surprisingly became one of their strongest advocates. "I was wrong," she admitted candidly during an impromptu gathering at the local community center. "I've observed Michael with the Mitchells. The stability they provide, particularly through the dog's unique connection with the child, is irreplaceable. Disrupting this arrangement now would constitute its own form of trauma." Meanwhile, Michael retreated further into himself as he processed his mother's death. The night terrors returned with increased intensity, often featuring his mother calling for him from the drainage tunnel while he was unable to reach her. During daylight hours, he spoke less and clung to Duke with desperate intensity, as if fearing the dog might also disappear. The crisis point arrived unexpectedly on a seemingly ordinary Thursday afternoon. Robert was working in the front yard, maintaining the vigilant presence he had established since the threats began. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing dinner while Michael and Lily played a simple board game in the living room, Duke dozing beside them. The weathered blue sedan rolled slowly down Maple Street, nothing distinguishing it from any other vehicle except the intent focus of its driver on the Mitchell home. Robert recognized the face behind the wheel instantly, despite never having seen it in person before. The hard eyes, the distinctive scar, the expression of cold determination. Richard Reynolds had finally made his move. Robert reached for his cell phone to alert Detective Martinez, but before he could dial, Reynolds accelerated suddenly, abandoning subtly. He swerved into the Mitchells' driveway, blocking the front entrance, and emerged from the vehicle with alarming speed. Something metallic gleamed in his right hand as he advanced toward Robert. "Where's my son?" Reynolds demanded, his voice eerily calm despite the wild rage in his eyes. "I know he's here. He belongs with me." In that moment of confrontation, seeing the face of the man who had terrorized Amanda and Michael Reynolds, who had likely murdered a young mother and abandoned his son to die, that Robert Mitchell made a split-second decision that would change all their lives forever. The confrontation between Robert Mitchell and Richard Reynolds froze in a moment of terrible tension. Reynolds advanced, weapon glinting in the afternoon sun, while Robert stood his ground on the lawn, positioning himself between the intruder and his home. Inside, unaware of the danger unfolding, Sarah continued preparing dinner while Lily and Michael played under Duke's watchful eye. "You have no rights here, Reynolds," Robert stated firmly, his military training evident in his controlled stance. "The police are on their way. Your best option is to leave now." Reynolds sneered, continuing his approach. "That's my son. Mine. No court, no cop, and certainly no old man is going to keep him from me." What happened next occurred with such startling swiftness that later Robert could barely recall the sequence of events. A police cruiser turned onto Maple Street, part of the increased patrol presence Detective Martinez had arranged. Reynolds, spotting the vehicle, hesitated momentarily, then lunged toward Robert with renewed determination, clearly intent on forcing his way into the house before authorities could intervene. In the ensuing struggle, a neighboring child's basketball rolled into the street, followed by the child himself. The police officer, attention diverted between the altercation in the Mitchells' yard and the child in the roadway, swerved sharply. The screech of brakes pierced the afternoon quiet. Inside the house, the commotion drew Sarah to the window. She glimpsed Robert grappling with a stranger and immediately activated their emergency protocol, rushing to the living room. "Safe room now," she commanded, her voice leaving no room for questions. Lily understood immediately, grabbing Michael's hand. "Come on, Michael. Like we practiced. Magdiam." But Michael remained frozen, his eyes fixed on the window where he had caught a glimpse of the confrontation outside. His face drained of color, his small body beginning to tremble violently. "Bad man," he whispered. "Bad man here." Duke sprang to attention, positioning himself between Michael and the front door, hackles raised, a low growl emanating from deep in his chest. The dog's protective stance seemed to snap Michael out of his paralysis. He allowed Sarah to hurry him and Lily toward the designated safe room, Duke following closely behind. Outside, police officers separated Robert and Reynolds, restraining the latter despite his violent resistance. As Reynolds was forced toward the patrol car, he locked eyes with Robert. "This isn't over," he spat. "I have rights. I'm his father." The immediate danger contained, Robert rushed inside to check on his family. He found them in the safe room, Sarah holding both children close, Duke standing guard at the door. Michael's face was buried against Sarah's shoulder, his body still trembling, but physically unharmed. "He's secured," Robert assured them. "The police have him. We're safe now." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of police statements, medical checkups, and extended conversations with Detective Martinez. Richard Reynolds was charged with multiple offenses, including violating the restraining order, assault, and trespassing. More serious charges related to Amanda Reynolds' death were pending further investigation. For now, at least he was securely held without bail. The following evening, as the family attempted to return to some semblance of normalcy, Robert noticed something unusual. From the hallway, he heard soft music coming from the rarely used study where his old piano sat covered and largely forgotten. Approaching quietly, he discovered Michael seated at the bench, his small fingers moving hesitantly across the keys, creating a simple but recognizable melody. Robert remained in the doorway, unwilling to interrupt what appeared to be a moment of peaceful exploration for a child who had known so little peace. After several minutes, Michael noticed his presence and stopped abruptly, hands retreating to his lap. "That was beautiful, Michael," Robert said gently. "Do you like music?" Michael nodded slightly. "Mommy piano," he offered the most voluntary information he'd shared about his life before the tunnel. Robert moved slowly into the room, careful not to crowd the child. "Your mother played the piano?" Another nod, more enthusiastic. "Mommy teach?" "Every day." Robert settled onto the far end of the bench, allowing Michael plenty of space. "Would you like to play some more? I could help. I used to play a lot before my hands got stiff." To his surprise, Michael scooted marginally closer and placed his hands back on the keys. With remarkable confidence for a 4-year-old, he began playing a simple exercise, his small face intense with concentration. When he finished, he looked up at Robert expectantly. Robert recognized the exercise, a basic finger drill taught to beginning students. Somewhat rusty, but recalling enough, he played the response sequence. Michael's eyes widened in recognition, and for the first time since his mother's death was confirmed, his face brightened with something approaching joy. For the next hour, they engaged in a musical conversation of sorts, Michael demonstrating snippets of pieces his mother had taught him, Robert responding with harmonizing parts. When Sarah eventually found them, she stood transfixed in the doorway, witnessing the unexpected breakthrough. "He's remarkably talented," Robert told Sarah later that night as they discussed the surprising development. "Amanda must have been teaching him from a very young age. His finger dexterity and sense of rhythm are extraordinary for a child his age." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "It's as if you've unlocked a different part of him, a part untouched by the trauma." The discovery of Michael's musical ability created a new avenue for communication and healing. Robert brought the piano back to life, having it tuned professionally and establishing a daily routine where he and Michael would play together. Social workers and therapists incorporated music therapy into Michael's treatment plan, using it as a bridge to help him process his emotions and experiences. During one such session, as Michael played a melancholy piece that seemed beyond his years, he suddenly stopped and looked up at the therapist. "I remember everything," he said with unexpected clarity, his voice stronger than they had ever heard it. The statement launched an entirely new phase in the investigation. With specially trained interviewers using music as a facilitation tool, Michael began revealing details about his life with his parents, the escalating abuse his mother had endured, and ultimately the events leading to his concealment in the drainage tunnel. The most shocking revelations came during a recorded session attended by Detective Martinez. Through a combination of words, music, and drawing, Michael revealed that his father hadn't acted alone. He described Daddy's friends, other men who sometimes came to their house for special meetings, in the basement while Michael and his mother were instructed to stay upstairs. "Mommy took pictures," Michael explained, drawing what appeared to be a cell phone hidden in a book. "Said they were bad men doing bad things. Said pictures would make us safe." Martinez immediately recognized the implications. "Evidence," she murmured to the other adults present. Amanda was gathering evidence of criminal activity. Further gentle questioning revealed that on the day Amanda hid Michael, she had told him she was going to give the pictures to people who would stop Daddy. The suspected murder wasn't just a domestic violence case, it was potentially connected to organized criminal activity that Amanda Reynolds had been documenting. This revelation transformed the case entirely. Richard Reynolds' bail hearing, originally scheduled as a formality, became a high-security proceeding with additional charges related to racketeering and conspiracy. The investigation expanded to include Reynolds Associates, with federal authorities joining the case. What had appeared to be a tragic but relatively straightforward domestic situation was revealed as something far more extensive and sinister. For the Mitchells, these developments brought mixed consequences. On one hand, the evidence of Reynolds' involvement in organized crime strengthened their position as foster parents, making the courts more reluctant to disrupt Michael's placement. On the other hand, the expanded investigation raised new safety concerns as Reynolds' criminal associates remained at large and potentially motivated to silence Michael. The custody hearing, scheduled just 2 weeks after Reynolds' arrest, took on heightened significance. Diane Kelly, Amanda's sister, arrived with her attorney and a detailed family history intended to support her claim. The proceedings began routinely enough, with character witnesses for both the Mitchells and MS. Kelly presenting their testimonies. When Michael was brought in for a brief, child-friendly interview with the judge, Duke was permitted to accompany him as a therapy support animal. The dog's calming presence allowed Michael to speak more freely than he might have otherwise, describing his time with the Mitchells with surprising eloquence. "They found me when I was lost," he explained simply. "Duke heard me crying when nobody else could. They keep the bad dreams away." During a recess in the proceedings, as attorneys and family members mingled in the courthouse hallway, Diane Kelly approached Michael where he sat with Duke and a court-appointed guardian. To everyone's surprise, she knelt to the child's level and spoke quietly. "Your mother wrote to me about you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "She was so proud of your music, your spirit. I thought I was doing the right thing, fighting to bring you home with me. But watching you today, I see that you've already found your home." The moment represented a dramatic shift in the custody battle, but an even more significant revelation waited in the wings, one that would permanently alter the course of Michael's future and finally bring the complete truth to light. Justice arrived for Michael Reynolds in layers, unfolding gradually like the petals of a resilient flower pushing through concrete. Richard Reynolds' trial became a landmark case in Portland's judicial history, drawing attention not only for its emotional impact but for the extensive criminal network it ultimately exposed. Evidence recovered from Amanda Reynolds' hidden cloud storage accessed through information Michael provided about his mother's passwords revealed a sophisticated money laundering operation involving several prominent business figures in the community. Richard Reynolds received multiple consecutive sentences, ensuring he would remain incarcerated for the remainder of his life, with no possibility of parole. The courtroom on sentencing day was filled to capacity, Robert and Sarah sitting stoically in the front row while Michael remained safely at home with Lily and Duke. When the judge delivered the final verdict, Sarah reached for Robert's hand, both of them exhaling years of accumulated tension. "It's over," Robert whispered, though they both understood that legal closure represented only one aspect of the healing journey ahead. For Michael, protection came in multiple forms. The court granted the Mitchells permanent guardianship, with Diane Kelly receiving regular visitation rights, an arrangement that evolved naturally after her dramatic courtroom concession. The aunt relocated to Portland, renting an apartment just 15 minutes from the Mitchell home, and gradually formed a meaningful relationship with her nephew that honored her sister's memory while respecting the trauma-informed environment the Mitchells had established. Amanda would be grateful, Diane told Sarah during one of their increasingly friendly coffee meetings. "She'd have chosen you herself if she could have. You've given Michael what every mother wants for her child's safety, love, and the chance to remain himself despite everything he's endured." The neighborhood that had once divided over Michael's placement rallied together in the aftermath of Reynolds' trial. Patricia Wilson organized a community safety initiative, incorporating trauma-informed practices into neighborhood watch programs and establishing an emergency response network for vulnerable families. Even those who had initially opposed the Mitchells' guardianship acknowledged the undeniable evidence of Michael's flourishing in their care. Duke received formal recognition for his role in saving Michael's life. The mayor presented the German Shepherd with an honorary medal during a small ceremony at City Hall, an event covered by local media that characterized the dog as Portland's canine hero. More meaningful than the public accolades was the private bond between child and dog that continued to deepen. Duke slept beside Michael's bed each night, accompanied him to therapy sessions, and seemed to intuitively recognize the approach of nightmares, waking Michael gently before terror could take full hold. Music became Michael's primary language for processing his experiences. Robert, rediscovering his own passion through teaching Michael, converted the rarely used study into a proper music room. They installed a digital piano that Michael could play with headphones during nighttime hours when memories often pressed most heavily upon him. By his 5th birthday, Michael could play pieces that left his music therapist speechless, his small fingers expressing emotions his vocabulary still struggled to articulate. Music was Amanda's gift to him, Diane explained during one of Michael's first recitals, held in the Mitchells' living room for a small audience of supportive neighbors and professionals who had assisted in his case. She started teaching him when he was barely 2. Even during the worst periods of Richard's abuse, she preserved that sacred space for Michael, an hour of music each day where beauty existed without fear. Healing progressed in uneven increments. There were setbacks, nights when Michael regressed to hiding in closets, days when he refused to speak, moments when sudden noises sent him into protective stillness. But these episodes gradually decreased in frequency and intensity. The Mitchell household adapted around Michael's needs with the resilient flexibility of a family that had already weathered significant trauma together. Lily's role in Michael's recovery proved particularly significant. The girl, who had lost her own parents, demonstrated extraordinary empathy, seemingly understanding Michael's unspoken thoughts in ways the adults couldn't access. She created games that helped him process difficult emotions, invented secret signals for communicating discomfort in public settings, and fiercely defended his boundaries with the protective instinct of a born guardian. "They're healing each other," Sarah observed to Robert one evening, watching the children construct an elaborate blanket fort in the living room, Duke patiently allowing himself to be incorporated as a structural support. Lily needed someone to care for, and Michael needed someone who understood loss without requiring explanations. Michael's first day of kindergarten marked a milestone that had once seemed impossibly distant. The school, selected for its trauma-informed approach and small class sizes, worked closely with the Mitchells to develop appropriate accommodations. Duke received special certification as a therapy dog, permitted to accompany Michael during his initial transition. Photographs from that morning captured a solemn-faced but determined little boy, backpack nearly as large as himself, Duke walking proudly beside him to the classroom door. On the anniversary of Michael's rescue from the drainage tunnel, the Mitchells established a new family tradition. They gathered in their backyard, now transformed with swings, a sandbox, and a small vegetable garden. The children tended together and released biodegradable paper lanterns into the evening sky. Each family member wrote messages on their lantern before sending it aloft: gratitude, remembrances, hopes for the future. Michael's message that first year, painfully printed in wobbly kindergarten handwriting, brought tears to Sarah's eyes when he allowed her to read it. "Thank you, Mommy, for hiding me. Thank you, Duke, for finding me. Thank you, Mitchell family, for keeping me." As the lanterns drifted upward, carried on gentle autumn breezes, Robert gathered his expanded family close. Sarah, his partner in this unexpected journey. Lily, the granddaughter who had taught him to open his heart again. Michael, the child who had arrived in their lives through darkness and tragedy. And Duke, the loyal sentinel whose inexplicable persistence had altered all their destinies. Family isn't always what we expect, Robert reflected, watching the glowing lanterns ascend toward the stars. Sometimes it finds us in the most unlikely places, even in manholes. Michael leaned against Robert's side, his face illuminated by the rising lanterns. "Duke knew I was waiting," he said with the simple certainty of a child stating an obvious truth. "He heard me when nobody else could." As darkness settled fully around them, the lanterns became indistinguishable from the stars that had guided humanity through countless nights of uncertainty. The Mitchell family remained in their backyard long after the last light disappeared, bound together by love that had emerged from the deepest places of human suffering, a love as stubborn and vigilant as a dog who refused to abandon his post until every lost soul was found. Life often tests us in unexpected ways, presenting challenges when we least expect them and asking us to step beyond what we believe possible. In the twilight of our years, many of us question our purpose, wondering if our most meaningful contributions lie behind us. But as Robert and Sarah Mitchell discovered, sometimes life's most profound chapters begin precisely when we think the story is winding down. Their extraordinary journey with Michael reminds us that we are never too old to save a life, to rebuild a family, or to stand against darkness. The wisdom we've accumulated, the patience we've developed, and the resilience we've forged through decades of living aren't burdens of age, but gifts that uniquely qualify us to shelter those most vulnerable. Like Duke, who refused to abandon his vigil until Michael was found, our persistence matters. Our commitment to what's right matters. Our love matters. No matter our age, we remain capable of extraordinary courage, life-changing compassion, and the kind of steadfast love that transforms tragedy into triumph. The most meaningful chapters of our lives may still be waiting to be written. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.